He said it once. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't explain. He just looked at her across the marble kitchen of the apartment he'd given her a key to 6 months ago and said, "Leave." An amorous Voss, who had survived things that would have broken most people, who had never once run from anything in her 31 years, looked back at him for exactly 4 seconds. Then she picked up her coat from the back of the chair. She didn't slam the door. She didn't cry. She just walked out of Sung-ho's life the way she had walked into it, with her chin up and her hands steady and absolutely nothing to prove to anyone. That was on a Thursday in November. By Friday morning, she had booked a one-way ticket to Boston. By Saturday, she was gone. Sung-ho stood at the window of his penthouse in Washington, D.C. and watched the city below him move the way it always moved. Indifferent, enormous, loud. He had held this city in the specific way powerful men hold things. At distance. With precision. He had never once lost sleep over a decision. He had made harder calls than this before breakfast and never looked back. But that was before amorous. That was before he understood what it meant to watch someone leave a room and feel the room go with her. He told himself he'd made the right call. His father Raymond had been clear, the kind of clear that comes with consequences attached, the kind that lands like a contract rather than a conversation. Sung-ho had listened. He had agreed. He had gone home and looked at the woman who made him want things he didn't have language for, and he had said the one word that would end it cleanly. He had not expected clean to feel like this. Aaron found him still at the window at midnight, still in the same clothes, the city below still moving without caring. Aaron, who had worked beside Sung-ho for 9 years and knew the difference between his silences, said nothing. He set a glass of water on the side table and stood by the door and waited. After a long time, Sung-ho said, "She's gone." "I know," Aaron said. "Good," Sung-ho said. Neither of them believed it. 6 months later, Sung-ho is sitting in a conference room in Georgetown when his phone buzzes. Not his main line. The secondary. The one only Aaron has the number for. He picks it up and reads 4 words on the screen. "I found where she is." He sets the phone down on the glass table. He looks at the men across from him still talking, shipping routes, territory lines, a name that needs to be resolved before the end of the month. He picks the phone back up. He types 1 word back, "Where?" And just like that, 6 months of telling himself he was fine collapses like a wall that was never properly built. To understand why he said it, you have to understand what she was. Not to the city, not to the people who knew her work. To him. Amaris Voss had spent 4 years building a design firm in Washington, D.C. from a single client and a studio apartment with 1 good lamp. She was the kind of woman who could walk into a gutted room, bare walls, bad bones, wrong light, and see exactly what it wanted to become. Her clients called her a genius. Her accountant called her reckless. Priya, her closest friend since college, called her the most quietly stubborn person she had ever loved. Amaris called herself practical. She did not believe in luck. She believed in preparation and pattern recognition and the specific kind of patience that lets you wait for the right moment without losing yourself in the waiting. She had grown up in Boston in a house where money was a conversation that happened behind closed doors and never quite reached her side of them. She had clawed everything she had out of nothing, and she was proud of it in the way you are proud of things that required everything you had. She was not supposed to meet Sung-ho. She was not supposed to be at that gallery opening in Georgetown on a Wednesday in May. She had gone because her client had a piece in the exhibition and Amaris believed in showing up for people who paid her on time. She had worn the green dress, the one Priya always said made her look like she owned the room, and she had stood in front of a large oil painting of the Potomac at night and been thinking about load-bearing walls when someone stopped beside her. He didn't introduce himself. He just looked at the painting and said, "It's missing something." Amaris looked at him. Tall, Korean, dark suit, the kind of face that belonged in a room like this and knew it. Tattoos visible at the collar, dark ink crawling up the left side of his neck. His hands in his pockets. His eyes on the painting like it owed him something. "It's missing natural light," she said. "The artist painted the river at night, but lit the canvas like afternoon. The shadows are wrong." He looked at her then. Really looked. The way you look at something you weren't expecting to find where you found it. Sung-ho, he said. Amorous, she said. They stood in front of the painting for 40 minutes. She talked about light. He listened in a way that suggested he had never fully listened to anyone before and was surprised to find he preferred it. By the time they moved to the next piece, she knew his first name and the shape of his attention and nothing else. That was enough to be dangerous. What she didn't know, what she wouldn't find out until much later, was that the man standing across the gallery that night watching Sung-ho with careful eyes was his father, Raymond Cho. And Raymond had already decided she was a problem. They did not fall in love the way people in movies fall in love. There was no single moment, no lightning strike, no scene where the music swells and everything becomes clear. It was slower than that, more honest. The way a room changes when you open the right window, you don't notice it happening. You just realize at some point that everything feels different and you can't remember what it was like before the air came in. Sung-ho started showing up at places he had no reason to be. A furniture showroom in DuPont Circle where Amorous was sourcing materials for a Bethesda project. He came in asking about a table he didn't need and spent 45 minutes asking her questions about wood grain and joinery that she answered with the patience of a woman who loves the thing she knows. A coffee shop near her studio in Adams Morgan. 2 Tuesdays in a row, reading a newspaper at the corner table like a man who had always come here and had simply not been noticed before. The third time he appeared somewhere she was. She stopped pretending it was coincidence. You're following me, she said. Not angry, just accurate. I'm in the neighborhood, he said. You live in Georgetown. It's DC, he said. Everything is in the neighborhood. She almost smiled. She didn't let herself. Not yet. But she did sit down. Over the next 3 months, they built something neither of them had words for. She learned that he ran the city the way a surgeon runs an operation, with his hands and his nerve and a level of control that left no room for error. She learned he had a sister in California he spoke to every Sunday, that he had memorized the floor plan of every building he'd ever been inside, that he was funnier than he looked, which was saying something because he looked like a man who had forgotten what funny was. He learned she could identify the source of any material by touch alone, that she kept a journal she had never let anyone read, that she had rebuilt her firm twice, once after a client dispute that nearly finished her, once after a flood took her studio, and had not once considered doing anything else, that when something mattered to her, really mattered, she went quiet instead of loud, which was the opposite of every person he had grown up around. He learned she was the first person in his adult life who never asked him what he could do for her. That alone was worth more than he knew how to say. They were careful. He never brought her near his work. She never asked questions she could tell he wasn't ready to answer. It was not perfect, but it was real. And in Sung-ho's world, real was the rarest thing there was. What neither of them knew was that Raymond Cho had been watching all of it, taking notes, waiting for the moment that would cost the least and damage the most. That moment was coming. Raymond Cho did not arrive at his son's penthouse unannounced. He called first. He always called first, not out of courtesy, but because he understood that surprise was a weapon and he preferred to keep his weapons holstered until he was certain he would need them. He arrived at 8 in the evening on a Thursday in early November, 2 days before Sung-ho would say the word that ended everything. He sat across from his son in the living room with a glass of water he didn't touch, and said what he had come to say without preamble. He had people everywhere. That was how Raymond had built what he built, not through force alone, but through information. He knew about Amorous's firm. He knew about her studio, her clients, her lease. He knew about the gallery, the coffee shop, the Tuesdays in Adams Morgan. He had a file on her that was thicker than most people's histories, and he set it on the coffee table between them with the deliberateness of a man who had rehearsed this moment. She's a liability, Raymond said. She's civilian, she's visible, and she's inside your life far enough to be used against you. Sung-ho looked at the file. He didn't open it. She doesn't know anything about the business, Sung-ho said. That's not the point, Raymond said. The point is that someone who wants to reach you now has somewhere soft to press. Sung-ho said nothing. Raymond leaned forward. His voice dropped, not in volume, but in temperature. There are 3 families watching how you handle this territory transition. If they see a woman they can use, they will use her. If they can't get to you through business, they will get to her. I have seen this happen, Sung-ho. I have seen it happen to men who were twice as careful as you are. The room was quiet for a long time. What do you want me to do? Sung-ho said. End it, Raymond said. Cleanly. Now. Before someone else ends it badly. Raymond left at 9:15. Sung-ho sat in the living room for 2 hours without moving. He ran the calculation the way his father had taught him to run every calculation. Remove the emotion, identify the variables, assess the cost of each outcome. He was very good at this. He had been doing it since he was 17 years old, and it had kept him alive in rooms where most men did not survive their first mistake. The problem was that the calculation kept coming out wrong. Every time he ran it, the number on Amorous' side was higher than it should have been for a variable, higher than a liability, higher than a risk, higher than anything his father's logic had a category for. But Raymond was right about one thing. The three families were watching, and Sung-ho had not come this far by letting people he loved become the thing that destroyed him. He picked up his phone. He called her. He asked her to come over. She came. She was wearing the green dress. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Leave." She didn't ask him what he meant. She was a woman who understood precision, in materials, in structure, in people, and she heard exactly what the word contained. Not go for the evening. Not give me space. Leave. The weight of it was architectural. Final. The kind of word that doesn't leave room for negotiation because the person who said it has already done all the negotiating alone, without you, and handed you the result. For seconds. She gave him 4 seconds to take it back. He didn't. She picked up her coat. She walked to the door. She did not turn around. Not because she wasn't dying to, but because she had promised herself a long time ago that she would never let a room see her break. Not a room. Not a city. Not a man who had just looked at her like she was a problem he had solved. The drive to her studio took 11 minutes. She sat in the car outside for 6 of them. Then she went in, turned on the single good lamp, and sat at her drafting table and looked at the plans for a Georgetown townhouse she was supposed to finish by December. She looked at them for a long time. Then she opened her laptop and booked a one-way ticket to Boston. She did not call Priya that night. She did not call anyone. She packed her apartment in 3 hours with the focused efficiency of a woman who has had to move fast before and knows that thinking too much slows you down. She left the key on the kitchen counter. Not his key, her own copy. She had paid for the copy herself. She left it because keeping it would mean she was still holding something open, and she was done holding things open. The flight was at 7:15 Friday morning. She slept for 2 hours on the plane. When it landed in Boston, Priya was waiting at arrivals with a coffee and the specific expression of someone who knows everything without being told anything. She took one look at Amorous's face and said nothing. She just handed over the coffee and picked up one of the bags and walked. That was what Priya had always been. Not words. Presence. They drove to Priya's apartment in Cambridge in silence. Amorous drank the coffee. She watched the familiar streets of the city she had grown up in pass outside the window. The red brick, the old bridges, the Charles River flat and gray under November sky. It felt like arriving somewhere she had left a long time ago, which was exactly what it was. She set up her drafting table in Priya's spare room that afternoon. She called her DC clients and told them she was relocating. She found a subletter for her studio by Sunday. She did not look at her phone except for work. She did not let herself go to the place where he lived in her chest. She was practical. She believed in preparation and pattern recognition. But some nights, in the spare room with the drafting table and the single good lamp she had brought from DC, she pressed her hand flat against the wall and felt how solid and unmoved it was. And she was grateful for that. And she hated that she was grateful. December came. Then January. Washington, D.C. in winter is a city that doesn't soften. Gray skies, cold marble, the Potomac locked and still. Sung-ho moved through it the way he moved through everything. With precision, with control, with the specific expression that made people in his world read him as untouchable. He was not untouchable. He was just very good at the performance. Aaron watched him the way Aaron always watched him. Quietly, from the side, without comment. He had been beside this man for 9 years, and he knew the inventory of his moods the way a navigator knows weather. He had seen Sung-ho angry, calculating, cold, focused. He had never seen him like this. Still on the surface, hollow underneath, going through every motion correctly and feeling none of it. December passed. The territory transition Raymond had been so concerned about resolved cleanly. The three families that had been watching settled into their positions. Raymond called to acknowledge it and said, without quite saying it, that Sung-ho had made the right call. Sung-ho listened. He said the appropriate words. He hung up and sat at his desk for a long time looking at nothing. January passed. He worked. He slept. He called his sister in California on Sundays and answered her questions about his life with the practiced lightness of someone who has decided that truth is a burden he won't share. His sister was not fooled. She never was. But she knew him well enough to know that pushing didn't work, and she loved him well enough to keep calling anyway. February arrived like an afterthought. It was Aaron who cracked first, not with words, but with action. He set a folder on Sung-ho's desk on a Tuesday morning in the second week of February. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it was a Boston address, a business name, Voss Studio, now operating out of a space in the South End, and a photograph taken from the street outside. A lit window, a shadow behind frosted glass, a silhouette at a drafting table. Sung-ho looked at it for a long time. He did not ask Aaron how he found it. Aaron found everything. That was the arrangement. He closed the folder. He put it in the desk drawer. He went back to the document he had been reading. He opened the drawer again 40 minutes later. He looked at the photograph for a long time. The lit window, the shadow, the shape of a woman at work. Still working, still building, still exactly who she had been when he met her, and exactly who she would be regardless of what he had said on a Thursday in November, because Amorous Voss was not the kind of person whose identity required anyone else's permission to exist. He thought about the green dress. He thought about load-bearing walls. He closed the folder. He opened it one more time before the end of the day. And then he sat back in his chair and accepted something he had been refusing to accept for 3 months. That right and correct are not always the same thing, and that he had confused them, and that the cost of that confusion was sitting at a drafting table in Boston and did not know he was thinking about her. Boston in winter is a different kind of cold from Washington. Older, more personal. The kind that comes up through the floor of a building and settles in the walls and reminds you that this city has been standing through hard things for a very long time and will continue standing after you are gone. Amorous found she didn't mind it. She had grown up in it. It felt like honesty. The South End studio was smaller than what she'd had in D.C., but the bones were right. High ceilings, north-facing windows, good light for 8 months of the year, and she had learned a long time ago to work with what a room gave you. She built the space out herself over the first 3 weeks, the way she always built spaces, starting with the light, then the structure, then the details. By January, she had 3 new clients. By February, she had 5. Word traveled the way it always traveled in a city this size, through the people who paid attention, through the ones who understood what good work actually looked like. Priya came by every Tuesday with food and the particular kind of company that doesn't require you to be okay. She had stopped asking about DC by mid-December, which was exactly the right call, because Amorous had no answer that felt like the truth, and she was not willing to give Priya anything less. She talked about clients, about the studio, about a brownstone in Beacon Hill that had the most extraordinary original plasterwork she had ever seen, and an owner who wanted to cover it with drywall. She talked about everything except the thing she thought about in the hour before she fell asleep, which was the specific quality of a silence she had once sat inside that had felt more like company than most conversations she'd ever had. She was not pining. She was clear about this with herself. She was grieving. There was a difference. Pining looked backward. Grieving was just the weight of something real being gone, and you carried it and worked through it, and eventually it became part of the structure of you rather than something separate sitting on top. She was practical. She was patient. She was fine. She was also, in the middle of a client meeting in the 3rd week of February, reaching for a material sample when her phone buzzed on the table with an unknown Massachusetts number, and something in her chest did something she didn't have a name for. She let it ring. She checked it after the meeting. A voicemail, 11 seconds long. She played it standing alone in the studio after the client had gone, the late afternoon light going gold through the north windows. 11 seconds of someone breathing. No words, just breath. And then the line ending. She played it twice. She knew that breathing. She had fallen asleep next to it. She sat down on the floor of her studio with her back against the drafting table and stayed there for a long time. Sung-ho had not planned the voicemail. He had dialed from a clean number Aaron sourced, untraceable, unknown, and when her voicemail picked up he had been prepared with words. He had rehearsed them. 3 sentences. Honest, clean, not asking for anything. Just the truth delivered the way he delivered everything important, without decoration and without distance. But her voicemail greeting was her voice. And her voice, 11 seconds in, was still exactly what it had always been. Low, even, the particular cadence of someone who has never needed to perform anything for anyone. And every word he had prepared left him completely. He said nothing. He breathed. He ended the call. He told himself it was a mistake. He told himself the voicemail would alarm her, that a silent call from an unknown number was exactly the wrong opening, that he had handled this with none of the precision he applied to everything else. He was right about all of it. He called Aaron. "I need to go to Boston," he said. Aaron was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that means I have been waiting for you to say this for 3 months, and I am not going to say that out loud. When? He said. Saturday, Sung-ho said. Alone. Sung-ho thought about it. Alone. He drove up on Saturday morning, leaving DC before light, the highway empty, the sky going from black to gray to the flat white of a February morning over New England. He had the South End address. He had nothing else. He had not called ahead. He was not going to call ahead. He understood enough about Amorous to know that giving her time to prepare meant giving her time to build a wall, and she was very good at walls, better than anyone he had ever met. He found the studio at 10:45, a narrow building on a side street, brick, 3 floors, a lit window on the 2nd level. He sat in the car across the street for 20 minutes. He was not afraid of many things. He was not sure what to call what he was feeling, but it operated in the same space as fear. He got out of the car. He rang the studio buzzer. A long pause. Then her voice through the intercom. Not the voicemail voice, the real one, slightly rougher in the morning, careful. Who is it? He had prepared for this too. Had planned something measured. Something that gave her a choice without pressure. What came out was, "It's Sung-ho." The intercom was silent for 15 seconds. He counted them. Then the door buzzed open and he went in, up 1 flight of stairs, to a landing where a door stood slightly open, warm light coming through the gap. He pushed it open. She was standing at the drafting table with her back to him. Not because she hadn't heard him, because she needed the extra 2 seconds, and she was taking them. He understood that. He waited. She turned around. She had not rehearsed this. She had spent 6 months being practical and structured and building things that made sense, and she had not once rehearsed what she would do if he walked through a door, because she had not believed he would walk through a door. She had believed the word leave. She had believed it because she had heard it in the voice of a man who never said anything he didn't mean, and she had understood it completely. He was wearing a dark coat. No tie. He looked, for the first time since she had known him, like someone who had not slept properly in a long time. Not broken. Not soft. Just used. The way a building looks when it has been holding something heavy for longer than it was designed to hold it. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You drove up." "Yes," he said. "From DC." "Yes." "It's February," she said. "It's 6 months." "I know," he said. The studio was quiet around them. The good quiet of a working space, materials on the shelves, plans pinned to the wall, the single good lamp on at the far end. Outside, the South End moved the way Boston moved in winter, slowly, carefully, like something that has learned to conserve its energy for the long cold. "Why?" she said. "Just that." He looked at her. He had the words. He had prepared them again in the car, had gone over them 3 times, and they were good words, honest words, the kind that said what needed to be said without asking for more than she was able to give. And he started to say them. He got as far as, "My father came to me." "I know about your father," she said. He stopped. She turned back to the drafting table. She picked up a pencil. She set it back down. "I'm not stupid, Sung-ho. I never asked about your world because I didn't want to make things difficult for you. But I paid attention. I know what your father is. I know what that conversation would have looked like." She paused. "What I don't know is why you believed him instead of me." The room absorbed that. "I wasn't protecting you," Sung-ho said. "I was afraid." She looked at him. "I was afraid that if I kept you close enough, someone would find a way to use you. And I didn't trust myself to protect you and run the territory transition and manage my father at the same time. So I made the calculation and I removed the variable." He paused. "I didn't understand that the variable was the only thing in the calculation that mattered." Amaris stood very still. She was looking at him the way she looked at a room with complicated bones, trying to see what it actually was beneath what it was presenting. "That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me," she said. "I know," he said. "I should have said it in November." She didn't answer immediately. Outside, a city bus moved through the street below. The lamp hummed. The plasterwork in the corner caught the light the way good bones always catch the light, just enough to remind you they're there. "I'm not going back to DC, she said. "The studio is here now." "I know," he said. "And I'm not giving up the studio." "I know," he said. "So what exactly are you here to ask me?" she said. He looked at her. He didn't have a clean answer for this. He had the honest one. "I'm not here to ask you to give up anything," he said. "I'm here because 6 months of correct decisions felt like the longest mistake I have ever made. And I am done making it." The silence that followed was not empty. It had the same quality as the silences they had built together in DC. Wait without pressure. Room to breathe inside it. "You haven't asked," she said. "You just showed up." "Yes," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "There's coffee. It's on the counter." She turned back to her drafting table. She picked up the pencil. She went back to work. He took off his coat. He found the counter. He poured the coffee. And he sat down in the chair by the window, the one that caught the morning light, and he waited, not demanding anything, not filling the silence with apology or performance, just present. She could feel him across the room, steady, exactly as he had always been. But that was only the beginning of what had to be said. They talked until the light changed. She told him what the 6 months had cost, not in the way of an accusation, but in the way of a ledger. The clients she'd had to rebuild from zero. The nights in Priya's spare room. The Tuesday she had played an 11-second voicemail twice, and then sat on the floor of her studio and not moved for 20 minutes. She said it all the way she said everything important, without excess, without drama, with the steady clarity of a woman who has processed her experience and is now simply reporting it. He listened the way he had always listened to her, completely. No interruption. No defense. When she finished, he did not apologize in the way that asks to be forgiven immediately. He said, "I understand what I cost you. I don't expect that to be resolved today." She looked at him. "Then what do you expect?" "Nothing," he said. "I came because staying away was the wrong choice, and I wanted to stop making it. What happens next is yours to decide." Outside, afternoon had gone to early evening. The studio was darker now, the good lamp throwing its circle of warmth across the plans on her drafting table. Boston settled into its winter evening sounds, traffic gentling, a city bus, somewhere across the street a door closing against the cold. Amaris stood at the window and looked out at the South End street below. She had built a life here in 6 months. A real one, with weight and structure and clients who trusted her, and a studio with the right bones and a friend who showed up on Tuesdays. She had done it alone, which was not nothing, which was, in fact, exactly the thing she had always been most certain of about herself. She did not need him. That was important. That was the ground the rest of it had to stand on. She turned from the window. She looked at him sitting in the chair by the window, coat folded over his arm, coffee long finished, the city behind him going dark. "Raymond," she said. "Handled," Sung-ho said. "He understands that I will not be making that particular calculation again. And the 3 families." "Settled," he said. "Have been since December." She nodded slowly. She was very quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm not moving back to DC. I know," he said, "and you'll have to come here. Not every week, but regularly." "Yes," he said, "and I need you to talk to me," she said. "Not solve things in private and hand me the result. If something is coming, I need to know it's coming. I'm not afraid of complicated. I've rebuilt twice from nothing. I can handle complicated." "I know you can," he said. And the way he said it, not as reassurance, but as acknowledgement, landed differently than any reassurance would have. She looked at him for one more long moment. Then she crossed the studio floor, picked up her coat from the chair, and held it out to him. "There's a restaurant 2 blocks over," she said. "The owner is a client. Good bones in the dining room. You'll notice." He stood. He took the coat. He almost smiled. Just slightly. Just enough. They walked out into the February evening side by side. Not touching. Not performing anything. Just 2 people moving through a city together, starting something that had already been through the hardest part and was still standing. The cold hit them at the door. She turned her collar up. He fell into step beside her. And Boston, which has seen everything and is impressed by none of it, moved around them the way it always moves. Old and certain and completely unbothered. But some things don't need a city to witness them. Some things just need 2 people who finally stop pretending that correct and right are the same word, walking toward a table in a restaurant with good bones, ready, for the first time, to say the true thing instead of the safe one. If this story reached you, subscribe and turn on your notifications, because the next one is already waiting. Drop a comment and tell me, which moment broke you first? Was it the word leave, or the 11-second voicemail, or the coffee she poured without asking? And tell me this, should the next story be Prius? Because she has been watching all of this from the beginning, and she has a story of her own that nobody has thought to ask about. Or should we go back to Raymond and find out what he was really protecting and what it cost him? You decide. I'll be here.